Greetings, people. Hope everyone is well. I guess this is going to be a kind of a follow-up on some of the issues I've been talking about and sort of an update video. I think if I'm going to register a concern or a way to get at what I want to talk about. First, I want to say that the last video that I posted were all of these just everyday, simple, mundane examples where I was trying to illustrate that even at a local level, there's going to have to be some sort of third-party arbitration that's going to end up looking something like government. I think some people didn't find that very appealing or persuasive. They wanted to say that no, the concern over government is about much bigger issues, and I understand. I guess another part of me was like, I was just trying to illustrate some of the range and the scope of the kinds of concerns and how it will occur even at very pedestrian, again, everyday levels. That's fine. I think what I would rather do is just talk for a couple of seconds here, be as quick as I can here, about I guess the way that corporate values are infiltrating life and that consumer capitalism. Now, not capital per se, right? I'm not advocating a leftist argument about redistributing the wealth. I guess I'm airing a concern over the kinds of self-understanding that seem to be coming into the culture from consumer capitalism. And I think that's really partly where I would want to get at, where I think some people who, for good or ill, have concerns over what will happen when everything becomes privatized and corporatized. And it has to do, I think, some way with the kinds of, I guess, sensibilities that get cultivated. And as much as a person may want to say, yes, well, nationalism and statism is a problem, I think they want to say, well, consumer capitalism is also a problem. Okay, so what are the alternatives? What are the options? And what is it that the world will look like in as we try to find a space in between those, or when one of those takes over, or if we get rid of one? I mean, all these sort of questions. So I think, some examples of larger issues that I think some people want to say, look, the state is going to have to take over this. Other people say, no, we should privatize it. One would be just the simple issue of environmental protection. To what extent are you going to privatize the right of free, clean air, of water? Who will be involved in environmental protection? Will that not have to be something like a a public body, or will it have to be different privatized interests who will war over that? I mean, again, perhaps that would be the case. I think when people want to point to the lack of laws in the U.S., one classic example would be related to this would be the way that the U.S. is really skinny on its food labeling laws. In most countries, European countries, westernized countries, they're much more stringent about food labeling laws, about informing people on what exactly they're consuming. And I think people are more aware of the degree to which genetically modified foods are entering into their bodies and into their environments. We just don't have any awareness there. How much genetically modified food are people eating? What are going to be the long-term consequences of this? I don't know. That really does seem to be, that's a legitimate concern. I think that it is. Public education, let's take that. Public education is an interesting case, partly because, university is a medieval institution. They still wear robes, and it's university has traditionally tried to set itself over apart the ebb and flow of contemporary markets and the usability of what, or the viability of whatever happens to be in fashion in the corporate environment. That is, corporate or capitalist orientations have a tendency to dispose and just get rid of whatever doesn't have immediate commercial value. Maybe they'll hold on to something if they can imagine a long-term value for it, but if people don't see a direct value, they say, get rid of that, let's use our resources elsewhere. And that really does become a problem for whole domains within the university, whether that's history or Latin or philosophy, or, I mean, we could give lots and lots of fields that we want to say this has an intrinsic value, even if it doesn't have value to current commercial market. Now, I don't know if everyone who's, saying that they're an anarcho-capitalist, that they're a consumer capitalist. I think that would be a reduction, and I'm not going to put words in people's mouths, but I would say that's one of the concerns that people should have, is that universities traditionally are defending those beliefs, ideas, systems of thought that may not have an immediate cash value and may not be of direct relevance, again, to a commercial market, but they may have intrinsic value to the people who learn to grow themselves and cultivate themselves by studying these, becoming who they become by way of them, right? Not everything in the world is something that can be bought, right? An understanding of a philosophical argument, an appreciation of a poem, a command over various historical battles and an understanding of why certain battles went on, that may be more than and other than what you use to get a job. It may be not just job training, and I think that's part of the concern, is that as universities, if they would become completely privatized, that potentially, you're going to have, a reduction of knowledge to what has commercial value. I mean, just look at the way that the food and dairy, um, the way that those organizations created the four food groups because they saw the rise of vegetarianism. I mean, I think you would see rises of promoting information that really is just serving corporate interests. And I mean, the question of, do universities as public institutions, do they have obligations to help create citizens who are informed about local governance, regional, national governance, international governance? To what extent is making citizens part of what the mission of the university is, rather than just making employees? I think that would be part of it. And this does relate to, again, to a lot of different ways that consumer capitalism and becoming a consumer, and it cuts, I think, against other kinds of values. Now, these aren't values, I guess, that are going to be represented by the state, but the state ends up intervening to pick up the slack. Now, take the example of the somewhat flattening uh, of social relations as it's occurred in this century. So in the 20th century, lots of people have given up their friends and family. They've moved away to pursue a better job. People who haven't done that, they're called what's geographically bound, and they've been unable to make career moves, or they've been sort of trapped in a job, or they've been unable to get a job because, again, they're unwilling to relocate to get that job. The people who have done that, who have, um, again, maybe moved to a radically different state, maybe even a different country, but they no longer are surrounded by family. They no longer have aunts and uncles, cousins, grandparents aren't there. And so now those parents are raising the kids largely on their own without all of those social family and extended family resources. And it's putting a real pinch upon people on the kind of parenting that's available. And corporations are squeezing people, partly, right, to give up their friends and families, to be willing to relocate, or they'll, the wages are best for those people who are willing to make those career advancements that often will require relocating. And the, I guess, what happens in domestic abuse cases, or when troubles happen in those now very flattened family situations, uh, when parenting goes awry, when the parents lose their cool, or when the parents are fighting, instead of having extended family there and grandparents and other people to come in and try to alleviate those tensions, well, various state functions come in. You end up with, I guess, uh, I mean, various forms. I mean, not just police, but you have various state and governmental workers who may come in and get involved to arbitrate disputes and do all this kind of intervention. And I think the point here is that as much as I agree that there may be some real gains in getting rid of, quotes, the state, again, getting rid of it is too strong for me, of minimizing the state, of realizing that people should have greater senses of freedom and liberty in their lives, and there should be more self-legislation and self-governance. I guess some of these larger concerns about what will rise in, what will take over as consumer capitalism and consumer values start to infiltrate all of these other areas as they become privatized. See, I think privatized largely means being made subject to consumer capitalist values. And I guess I would, want to hear some response to people about questions regarding the larger environment, questions concerning, does public education have an obligation to retain those bodies of knowledge, those systems of knowing that don't have immediate commercial interests? And what will happen as social relations become more and more flattened and extended family gets more and more diminished? Isn't there going to be some role of some kind of governmental and or state-like intervention that's related to all kinds of disputes that go on there? Okay, so those would be some questions and some follow-up issues. Okay, thanks.